The storytelling tool of Plant and Payoff is solely for the audience. And when it's incorporated properly, it makes stories so much more satisfying to watch, to consume. We as audiences love Plant and Payoff. So we're going to talk about what it is, we're going to talk about how to do it well, and I'm going to do it using a couple of examples from Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is one of my favorite movies, and just by mentioning I'm using Captain America, I'm using Plant and Payoff.
Thank you, Buck. But I can get by on my own.
You don't have to. I'm with you to the end of the line, pal.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing. I really do appreciate it. So if you're finding value, hit the button. I appreciate it. There's also some free stuff below. Be sure to check out those links. Let's not waste any more time. Let's jump in. Of all of the tools available to a storyteller, Plant and Payoff, hands down, is my favorite one to use. It not only makes the story just feel satisfying to an audience, but when it's done well, it makes the story feel smart. It makes it feel like you as the audience are in good storytelling hands because everything is connected. There's no fat. Everything comes back. It's just so wonderful. I love it. So I hope you love it too. I want you to include it because it just makes your story so much better. So what is it? Simply, Plant and Payoff is a callback to something that happened earlier in the movie. So it was planted earlier and it's paid off later. So something happens, then something similar happens again, it refers back to the other, and it kind of ties everything together. And you can use Plant and Payoff in a lot of ways. You can use it with music within the story. You can use it with score, although that tends to happen in post-production. You don't really incorporate that. But if you just think about score for a moment and you think about Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, things like that, the score helps tie things together. We hear a certain sound or a certain note and we realize like, oh, this is Darth Vader, or oh, this is the Shire, right? All the music helps to tie things together. That's one way to use Plant and Payoff. Another way is by using props. So somebody has a prop at the beginning, it gets used again, and it helps tie things together. Now, I'm not talking about like a gun for a cop. I'm talking about things like the top in Inception. I'm talking about these moments where someone has something that means something later. Here's a really great Plant and Payoff prop from Captain America. Ready? The compass. He's got the compass, he's got the picture of Peggy in it, and every time we see that, we know what that means. We know what it means. He doesn't have to say anything. We get it. And that's what Plant and Payoff can do. It communicates extra things every time we see it, and it helps the audience in some ways know what the character is thinking. So these are all really great tools to use. The most common Plant and Payoff tool, though, is dialogue. Someone will say something here, and then it gets said later. It gets said later. It gets said later. So we have things like, I can do this all day. That's a great line that shows up over and over and over in Captain America movies. He's saying it, he even says it to himself in Endgame.
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
It's just a great, fun line, and we know exactly what's going on. It helps tie everything together. It makes it satisfying for us. Now, the thing with Plant and Payoff, if it's something the character is interacting with, then they're aware of it. And they're usually aware of what's going on. They'll say the line intentionally, they do something intentionally. And if you think about it, it's kind of like how we think of inside jokes. You have an experience with someone and that creates a funny thing or a funny moment, and then you can be, years later and something similar can happen and somebody says that line and we remember the earlier time and we laugh or we do other things. That's what Plant and Payoff does. It helps to tie things together. It helps us know that all of this fits together, and it's just so satisfying. What are some best practices for using Plant and Payoff? Sometimes if you have a line of dialogue or a phrase or even a token or something like that, we may not notice it as an audience. We may not notice its significance the first time. So one of the things you want to do is, if you're going to have something that does a Plant and Payoff, introduce it, and then pay it off the first time fairly soon. This helps the audience know, like, oh, this is kind of a thing between them. This is an inside joke they have. This is something that means something to this character. And if we repeat it soon, that helps the audience know, like, oh, okay, that's important to them. But what happens though is the audience kind of forgets. We're not looking for it again. It was planted, it was paid off. So we kind of think like, oh, okay, it's done. But then you have it later at the end, and I'm going to talk about how to do some of this. And we remember because it's the same thing that this was, but now it just means so much more. Now it means something different. And we love that element. One of the great moments in Captain America Winter Soldier is right at the beginning. Sam Wilson's running, Captain America's passing him.
On your left.
On your left. It's said, okay, fine, first time, not a big deal. But then he says it again.
On your left.
On my left. Got it.
And then he says it again, and then it's like, don't you say it.
Don't say it. Don't you say
On
it.
your left.
Come on!
And we just kind of dismiss that, right? Like, okay, on your left, that was just kind of that a bit for that little scene, and then it's over and we kind of dismiss it. But it's introduced and then it's repeated. Okay, so that's one way to kind of help make sure that it works. Another way to help make sure that a plant and payoff is going to work is when you do the plant, you want to linger on it for a moment. You want to just spend a little more time than you might need to in that moment. We're going to dwell on this for a second. Captain America, Sam Wilson. You got a list? Okay, here you go. Trouble Man.
Marvin Gaye, 1972 Trouble Man soundtrack. Everything you missed, jammed into one album.
I'll put it on the list.
He writes it in the list, right? We're lingering on this. And this helps us notice it. It will help us remember it later because that one is not going to be repeated right away. He's just mentioning it and we're moving on. So if you can repeat it right away, that's great. Or linger a little bit. And now you can worry about paying it off later, which usually happens at the end. The best way to make Plant and Payoff feel smart is to add in space and time between when it was planted and when the payoff is. If you plant something early on, put as much space and time in the story as you can before it comes up again. You want it early on and then down here. And the further apart it is, one, the more surprising it is for the audience, and two, the smarter your story feels because now it feels like all of this, everything that these things bookended fits and it's all together and it just feels really satisfying. So the more space and time you can put in between when you plant something and when you pay it off, the better. Back to Captain America. And what do we get? Trouble Man. On your left.
On your left.
The things introduced in the first scene paid off in one of the ending scenes. It's such a great moment and it makes everything kind of feel like, okay, this is all together. And these two guys whom we saw meet early on are now friends. They have inside jokes. They're helping each other. Like, this is great. We love this relationship. But there's one more payoff for the on your left line. And it comes a couple of movies later, in Endgame.
Captain Sam, you hear me?
On your left.
On your left.
And we love that moment because we know exactly what it means. He's been saying it, now Sam gets to say it. And it's just a great moment. It's a payoff several movies later that we just love. That's what space and time can do. It makes everything feel like it fits together. And that's one of the reasons a lot of the Marvel movies feel like they fit together. There's lots of plant and payoff. There's lots of little things that get introduced here that get paid off later. And in another movie or in a TV show or whatever, like, they're paid off lots of ways. And it makes it feel like it's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the same story. Now, typically, plant and payoff happens in the rewrite stage. Because what you're doing is when you first write the story, you figure things out and you see what's working and what's not. And as you're rewriting, you're like, oh, this is a really good line. This should be a callback line. This is a payoff line. I need to plant this line earlier. And then you go back and you find a way to plant it. Or you find something early on, but you never pay it off. And you're like, oh, I got to find a way to pay that off. So typically it happens in the rewrite. So don't worry if it's not in your first or second draft. You tend to find them, and they're the moments that start to crop up that feel like these are really good moments. I love these moments. So you start to include them, but you don't usually find them until you're in the rewrite stage. The other thing with Plant and Payoff is it should have some new meaning. It should mean something different each time you use it. It can be just a nuance. It can be a marker in the change of relationship status, like their relationship's a little different. If it's just meaning the same thing over and over again, that's not Plant and Payoff. It should mean something a little different each time that happens.
Then finish it. Because I'm with you to the end of the line.
Maybe you've got a great example of Plant and Payoff. If you do, leave it in the comments below. Plant and Payoff is awesome. You should totally be using it in your stories. Use it as a storytelling tool. It is a great, great help to unify your story, make your story feel smart, and to engage the audience and let them feel like they're participating in the story. It's just a great tool. So if you're not using it, use it. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, please like, subscribe, bell, all that. I really, really do appreciate it. Don't forget there's links below. Be sure to check those out. When you go to tell a story, do some Plant and Payoff, but otherwise, tell a story that matters. See you later.